You're listening to Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Well, I guess I'm on. I was not paying quite attention. Josh, on the right-hand screen, I don't see myself. Do I need to see myself?
I can get you there.
Okay.
Give me a sec.
All right, you got Josh here pinch hitting today. Had a couple little technical glitches. Just a learning experience here, wasn't it, bud?
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't have any idea what they're doing. So anyway, but at corner screen, I like to look at my pretty face, even if nobody else does. But anyway, today we're just going to visit about what I see in the election campaign. And I had a couple people say, well, you're going to be both ways about this. Well, I'll do my best. I have to say, just as a summary statement, I have never seen a candidate rehabilitated like Kamala Harris. I don't want to, I'm not trying to make fun of her name, so don't get on me. But I've never seen doggone it, cords let go of me. All right, there you go. I've never seen a candidate who's had their image and their reputation so refurbished and rehabilitated by the press as I've seen with Kamala Harris. For a long time, she was considered to be a detriment to the Biden administration. And when they were telling everybody, 6 months ago that Joe Biden was as fit as a decathlete and ready to go, and, his press secretary couldn't keep up with him, and on and on and on, they said that another reason why he was so reluctant to drop out of the race, besides his own ego and all that, was that he didn't trust Kamala Harris. And a lot of the Democrat insiders said the same thing. They said that she was a drag on the ticket and that she was in no way capable of running the campaign or being the nominee. And now she's the greatest nominee since Teddy Roosevelt. And it drives me a little bit crazy. The New York Times in particular has been a massive cheerleader. The Post has run a couple of articles that may have been less than enthusiastic, but most of the time the coverage has been pretty good. It's all excited about her improving poll numbers, which they are improving. And it really is astounding that in about a 35-day period, Kamala Harris has gone from a detriment to the Democrat Party by their own statements and by their polling data to now being the greatest candidate they've ever had, and going to campaign on joy and all this other business, and I'm just astounded by it. And as far as whether she wins or not, I may address that towards the end. Now that doesn't mean necessarily I'm thrilled with Mr. Trump either. See, this is one of the things I've talked about more than once on the show is the rejection of binary thinking. It isn't, well, if you like Harris, you must hate Trump, or vice versa. If you like Trump, you must hate Harris. I think you can criticize both quite a bit. I think I have more grounds on policy to criticize Harris, but as far as temperament and the way he's conducted his campaign, I have a lot to criticize for Mr. Trump as well. But again, I urge y'all to reject this binary what about Trump business or what about Harris business. I had a very civil, cordial debate on Facebook not too long ago, a few days ago, about what I saw as Democratic hypocrisy about the wealth, and when you had, wealthy Democrats getting up there and talking about how we need to help the poor and all this other stuff, and I put out forwarded a post about the Obama's 4 homes that collectively around $20 million, and I said, which one of these homes are going to give up to, give them a bigger piece of the pie, as Michelle is quoted as saying, and all I got, and really, is 2 responses. A couple of the more committed progressives said, yeah, when we understand it and we're going to hold them accountable and all that. Most of them, the Democrat supporters, were of the mindset of, well, we don't care. They make their money and it's all good. And also, what about Trump? And he's wealthy and all this other stuff. It's like Trump has nothing to do with that argument. Many of the criticisms I have about Ms. Harris are not because I think Trump has the better answer to that particular argument. It's just that I can find serious issues with some of the ideas she's had put out on her behalf, which, by the way, has not been done by her personally, except for some offhand comments that now they've been walking back. All these things I'm going to address after the sponsor run, because I think, they pay the bills. We are a capitalist organization. And I want to make clear to anybody watching that the sponsors have their own opinions about all these things. Okay. And if you want to know what they think, ask them. But they sponsored the show so we can have this kind of conversation. So we should owe them some gratitude. So thank you, Otto, at our place and at Gina's. It's a great place to go, of course. I'll be there at our place Thursday morning. I bet sometime this week I'll be at Gina's as well, because my wife Robin's asking to go there. They really do have good food over at Gina's. I really like their meatball sandwich, and I really like their baked ziti. And as far as our place, well, everybody knows about their food, and that's why they have a full house for lunch every day. So check them out this week. Into school, or into summer rather, school started. Give yourself a treat. Also, our friends over at Wild Cigar, Nathan and Chris, they got some cigar specials going on. They have drink specials Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And Friday, for that matter. I think they have some sort of drink special every day, but I know they have happy hour Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They also have some great cigar deals. That's all. They make great gifts, and the gift cards make great gifts. It's National Cigar Smoking Days next week. I don't know about that, but anyway, it's a great place for gifts, and it's a great place to hang out. And now that college football is on, you'll have the game on, and so you can have a drink and smoke a cigar with your buddy, and actually hear yourself talk instead of being blasted out like some other places get to be. Also, thank you, John, over at Old Pro Roofing, John Williams, 817-734-2756. Like I said, this is the time to get your roof checked. Also, John has stressed the idea of that you need to have it checked within a certain period of time. If you think you have damage, you need to have it checked within 365 days of when you think that damage occurred, because after that point, you're going to have them, the insurance companies, maybe deny you coverage, or it costs you more, or whatever else. Plus, the fact is that one of the new innovations this year, regardless which insurance company you have, your roof damage is now twice the deductible. It's at 2% instead of 1% of the house value. So it's going to cost you a lot of money if you let the damage go on too long. So have John come check it out, and he'll tell you the truth if you need repairs or not. So thank you, John. Also, lastly, Jeff Kelly over at the Withington Agency. Jeff Kelly's got some property and some homes for you to see at 817-781-0546. Give Jeff a call or email at jeff@jeffkellyrealty.com. Homes are still selling in this area. And the rates, supposedly, what I'm reading, is going to come down. I've been talking to my friend Candy over at Camco, and they're drifting downward. And they would both, Jeff and Candy would tell you the best time to buy really is now, in a sense, because you can always refinance the house, but you can't refinance what the house costs. And as I start explaining to you some of these details here of the proposals that have been leaked out of the Harris campaign, house is going to be more expensive. All righty. Just to give you an idea where Ms. Harris stood, not even that long ago, and I'm not reading from Breitbart here. I got all these papers here. I'm not reading from some far right magazine. I'm reading quotes coming from the Washington Post and New York Times and Reuters and the Atlantic and whatnot. So these are publications that Democrats would accept as legitimate. Let's see, what did she say? Here's a couple. According on December 21st, December 2021, Washington Post says, staffers who worked for Harris before she was vice president said one consistent problem was that Harris would refuse to wade into briefing materials prepared by staff members, then berate employees when she appeared unprepared. So far, she's not given any contemporary or extemporaneous speech at all. It's all been telepromptered. It's all been in controlled environments. And so she hasn't had to think on her feet, and she doesn't prepare herself to do that. Now, people say, this is what drives me nuts. What if Trump never prepares? Well, I'll get to Trump in a minute, okay? All right? Also, writing in the New York Times, historian Jeffrey Frank, Harris hasn't been given the sort of immersive experience or sustained high-profile tasks that would deepen and broaden her expertise in ways Americans could see and appreciate. Her bonds with Biden and key administration officials are relatively thin. It's no small matter that she's had only a handful of private lunches this year. So, she hasn't been really involved that much in the administration, yet she wants to claim all this experience, except for being the border czar, that she's rejected that. I never was the border czar. That's exactly what the press called her, and the friendly press called her the border czar. Okay? Here's the thing. When I'm trying to make a case about some. I try to use sources that won't be automatically dismissed. I use primarily the Times, the Post, the Wall Street Journal, National Review, the Atlantic, and Politico, which has disappointed me a lot in this whole exercise lately. In their rooting for Harris so obviously, and occasionally I'll get some stuff from Fox, and I know some people say, "Oh, it's Fox." Well, Fox News is still a source that you don't often get from other news from other places. I'll put it that way. January 2023, Washington Post. Harris's tenure has been underwhelming, a dozen Democratic leaders in key states said, marked by struggles as a communicator and at times near invisibility. February 2023, even some Democrats, this is from New York Times, even some Democrats whom her own advisors referred to reporters for supportive quotes confided privately that they had lost all hope in her. So even when they were trying to do a puff piece on her in the New York Times, the people that she recommended that the Times contact said that negative things, that they were disappointed in her. March 2023, Reuters, Democratic sources say Biden has frustrations about some of her work. I don't think that the president sees her as somebody who takes anything off his plate. Okay, and there's other quotes like that. And now, the last 35, 40 days, it's been a miraculous transformation. And that's why I get so frustrated. Because the coverage of Ms. Harris in the mainstream press, for the most part, has not been legitimate news coverage. It's been propaganda. It's been pushing her forward. It's been willing to not be talked to. I mean, she has not spoken with the media in either a group or an individual setting since she was declared the nominee. She's not done any interviews with the print press or the television press. She hasn't done a sit down. She hasn't done a press conference. She hasn't done an extensive article. Any of that stuff, none of it. And the Democrats are okay with this. They're saying that's their plan. So basically they are telling us, vote for her and you'll find out what she stands for later. But let's see what public stuff has come out. Now, bear in mind, like in this first news clip I'm going to show you, bear in mind that this is not from her statements. It's from her campaign releasing certain documents or whatever about what she wants to do. This is not what she's saying. It's what they're saying she has said behind the scenes. So go ahead, Josh, do that first one if you would, please.
Both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are turning their attention toward the economy this week. CBS News correspondent Christian Benavides breaks down Harris's economic plan and how Republicans are responding.
In North Carolina Friday, Vice President Kamala Harris outlined an ambitious economic plan in her first policy speech since jumping into the presidential race.
Together, we will build what I call an opportunity economy.
On the housing affordability crisis, Harris is calling for the construction of 3 million new homes, proposing a tax break for builders, and giving up to $25,000 in down payment assistance for some first-time home buyers.
We will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes and rentals that are affordable for the middle class.
Harris called for a federal ban on price gouging on groceries and other goods. Former President Trump said the proposals amount to price fixing. At a press conference Thursday, he blamed Harris and Democratic legislation for rising costs.
Now Kamala is reportedly proposing communist price controls. She wants price controls. And if they worked, I'd go along with it too, but they don't work.
The vice president is also calling to expand the child tax credit to families with newborns to $6,000. Last week on Face the Nation, Republican VP hopeful J.D. Vance also called for expanding the child tax credit to $5,000. Christian Benavides, CBS News.
The Harris campaign says additional costs to the budget from her plan would be offset by increased taxes on corporations and high earners.
Okay, that's good enough. Well, that came out about 2 weeks ago, the speech, which is very light on details, strong on promises. 2 days later, the Washington Post comes out with its editorial. The headline says, "The Times demands serious economic ideas. Harris supplies gimmicks." This is from the Washington Post. And they go on and detail what little they know of it and said, this is not going to work. Okay. That first of all, the price fixing, which they have walked back quite a bit now because of all the criticism and all the data and the evidence that shows how silly that is. The price fixing has been downplayed a little bit. But anyway, they said basically the Post here calls them a bunch of gimmicks. And, the idea that when you talk about some of these things like a child tax credit sounds good, building homes sounds good, keeping the grocery stores in line sounds good, which I'm going to talk about that specifically in just a minute. It's all a bunch of promises that can't be backed up, and nor should they be backed up in some cases. Yeah, a child tax credit sounds great, but every credit and every deduction, every type of expenditure on the side of their plans, which amount to trillions of dollars, they think will be offset by taxes to about 10 or 15 people. New York Times today came out with an article. I haven't had time to read through it. That does a little bit better analysis on all these plans. And Washington Post had one over the weekend. It talked about, okay, you put all the numbers together, what happens? And they said that none of these things that they're talking about, even if they're enacted in full, are going to do anything about the deficit or the debts. Because whatever you increase on revenue, they have tremendous spending plans for it as well. And so, in my opinion, one of the most serious questions about our government now is the $35 trillion debt and rising, and neither candidate has a plan to address that. That's something both candidates fail totally on that, because to solve the deficit problem on the annual basis and to the long-term debt, you're going to have to deal with some painful decisions about Medicare and Social Security and maybe taxes even on middle earners and things of that nature, and significant cuts in spending. And they both have said, we're not touching Medicare or Social Security. In about 7 years? Yeah, about 7 years from now, if the Social Security situation isn't resolved, they're going to mandate by law 25% lower payouts to all recipients. It's going to go insolvent in 2032, and to try to keep it solvent longer, the law says that they're going to cut it by 25%. So that means people my age bracket and older who get Social Security, regardless of what they're getting, they'll get 25% less of it, unless it's resolved, and neither one has any intention of resolving it. And that's a bipartisan failure of gigantic proportions. One of the more, shall I say, to the point type of commentary came from Charlotte Rampell from the Washington Post. And Charlotte Rampell she's a little bit left of center, I guess. I mean, I've read her several times, and she's not always out there in the ledge, but she's moderate left a little bit. She wrote this: "It's hard to exaggerate how bad this policy is." She's talking about the price fixing policy. "It is, in all but name, a sweeping set of government-enforced price controls across every industry, not only food. Supply and demand would no longer determine prices or profit levels. Far off Washington bureaucrats would. The FTC would be able to tell, say, a Kroger in Ohio, the acceptable price it can charge for milk." Well, when articles like Ms. Rappel's came out and many others like it, they said, "Oh, no, that's not really what we're talking about." Many of the Democrats said, "Well, we're not going to, really do it." Politico had an article. I didn't print it, but Politico had an article this weekend, and basically off the record, about 24 Democrat lawmakers said that's not going to happen. That never passed Congress. And it's like, how cynical is this? You're going to promise people to lower their prices and then behind the scenes, off the record, under the table, the very party that she represents is saying, no, we're not going to go for that. But the promise has been made, and the applause lines have been given, and she's gotten all the poll bump from it, but they have no intention of doing this now. And many of them, even when she said it, had no intention of doing it. Now, maybe she did, but I don't think, that the Democrat Party wants to get involved in price fixing. Last time we fixed prices back in the early 70s under the Nixon administration, it was a cataclysmic disaster. You talk about shortages, okay? I'm an old economics teacher, and I would teach my classes, when you impose a price ceiling on a product that's below its equilibrium price, you're going to have shortages, because what's going to happen is, this is just a brief economics lesson. If let's say something should be $5, but the government says it's going to be $3, well, you're going to be able to afford more of it, but the producers are going to produce less of it because they're not making any money, and so you're going to have a shortage. It happens everywhere. You look at cities with rent controls; they have shortages of units. New York City is a prime example of that. San Francisco is a prime example of that. Oh, here's the chart. How about that? I forgot to send it. Okay. You got your pencils out? You got your notes, boys and girls? Okay, basically what you see on the screen here is that the price level should be up here around 20, equilibrium. If you put a $10 price limit on it, you're going to have a shortage, and it happens at every product you want to think of, because I will buy as much as I can at the lower price, but if I'm a producer, I'll produce less, if at all. And what these will do is going to cause unemployment and shortages. And that's exactly what happened with Nixon. And it also happened in the late 70s when they put price caps on gasoline because of all the foreign problems we were going through, and we had a shortage of gas. And when they took the caps off, gas prices almost tripled in a week. And I know this personally because I was a junior in high school, and I had a car, and I had to pay for gas. And back then the minimum wage was $2.30. And the gas got up to about like $1.60, $1.70 a gallon, and you think that's no big deal. In the late 1970s, that'd be the equivalent of about $5 today. And so it's just amazingly cynical, and it's wrong, to put these promises out there that I'm going to make sure HEB doesn't gouge you. I went to HEB yesterday. All right, I go grocery shopping. Prices are high. Do I blame HEB? Not really, because they're in a penny business, as they say. They get their profit margins are so slim. They make their money based on mass volume, not on any kind of high markups. And plus, what caused some of the high markups? High gas prices, higher labor costs. I'm not going to go begrudge that lady that's checking my groceries. Hey, you should be making minimum wage, not $18 an hour or whatever they're paying them. The Democrats talk about these things as if they have no impact on the economy whatsoever. You're going to raise the wages, fine, but then it's going to raise the prices, which will get me into corporate taxes. One of the ways she wants to raise revenues with corporate taxes. I am not a big corporate fan, so to speak, but that's a bad idea. She wants to raise it from 21% to 28%. Well, the big companies that are impacted by these corporate taxes at that rate are not going to just eat it. They're not going to swallow that, and they're going to either pass the cost along, or they'll lay people off to try to lower their costs to make up for it, or both. Corporate taxes is an easy target because we can all, envision some Wall Street fat cat, with a big cigar, hopefully from Wild Cigar, and also, just exploiting the masses and all this crap. But the point of the matter is, these companies employ millions of Americans. And if you make it harder for them to do business, they'll employ fewer of those Americans, and they will move. This is what happened in the Obama administration. And then they tried to raise corporate taxes. You had companies that were moving to other countries that had lower tax rates. Burger King is my favorite example because they used to be located, their headquarters was in Miami. Now it's in Toronto. Our neighbor has a lot lower corporate tax rate than we do. We had, at the time, before Trump lowered the corporate taxes, we had the highest corporate tax rate in the Western economy. Other countries that had lower ones were seeing American businesses move over there. High tech and pharmaceuticals were going to Ireland, for example. All right? And so now they would say, well, we're going to prevent that. We're going to have an international tax rate that will sign an agreement and have an international tax rate of 20% or something like that. Well, I don't like the fact that my tax rates may be dictated by the European Union or some other foreign outfit. But that's a separate story. You don't have to love the corporations, but the fact is they employ millions of people. They produce all the products we enjoy and use and need. And they say, well, their profits are obscene and all this other stuff. We need to do something about that. The thing about it, I can agree that stock buybacks are a scam. to just artificially raise stock prices for CEO bonuses. That's a scam. I got it. We could do something about that. The fact that Corporation X pays its CEO several millions of dollars a year, even if it ends up in the ditch, yeah, I could see why that's just very, very irritating and abusive. But the point is that if we make it more difficult for corporations to operate in this country, they won't do it anymore, and they'll move. John Deere out of Molina, Iowa, moved to Mexico, or is in the process of. Why? Because it's cheaper there, and I don't like that at all. John Deere is an American product as it gets, but it's moving to Mexico, and so when you have a 21% corporate tax rate, and now it's going to be 28%, it's going to hurt employees, it's going to hurt the production of products, and it will hurt stockholders. And people need to understand about stockholders. You know, there's some high-profile stock owner like Warren Buffett or whatever else. You know, or anybody want to talk about these big fat cats with all this going on. You know, most of us are affected by the stock market. My wife's IRA that she for retirement's affected by the stock market. All you people with 401ks are affected by the stock market. And so we can't just willy-nilly say, well, the stockholders can just take a little bit less. You're talking not just talking about my money, you're talking about maybe your money or your grandparents' money or whatnot. Also, Josh, there's the one on coming about housing, I believe I sent you. You want to run that one?
Together, we will build what I call an opportunity economy.
Kamala Harris has unveiled her economic plan. There's a big emphasis on lowering costs and taxes while boosting affordability.
I was thinking the fourth one I sent you. Is it, you know which one I'm talking about?
I believe so.
All right, try that one.
Now we're going to turn to the race for the White House. Both Vice President Harris and former President Trump are turning their attention to the key swing state of Pennsylvania.
Try one more. All right, this is the one.
There we go. On the issue of immigration. So I was the Attorney General of a border state. In that job, I walked underground tunnels between the United States and Mexico on that border with law enforcement officers. I went after transnational gangs, drug cartels, and human traffickers that came into our country illegally. I prosecuted them in case after case, and I won. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been talking a big game about securing our border, but he does not walk the walk. Or as my friend Quavo would say, he does not walk it like he talks it.
Stop. I can't do this. I don't want to see her acting like she's down with the hood or whatever. That's just ridiculous. But anyway, the thing is, her record on the border, both in California as senator from California and as vice president, is horrific. California has massive immigration issues. Yet they approach it in a totally different way Texas does. I read yesterday that California is trying to put together a program to allow illegal residents, migrants, to be able to buy homes in California. The Californians can't afford to buy homes in California, but they're going to have a plan to help citizens, or not citizens, people that are here illegally buy homes. I was stunned. I would say, what about all the other people who are having problems getting homes in California? And all this business about building 3 million homes and all this other stuff, it's not going to happen. Why? Because it's so difficult to build in this environment. When you're taxing people and you're going to be putting so many restrictions on them, not just, environmental restrictions, but also housing restrictions. San Francisco, where she's from, is one of the most restrictive housing areas in the country. And it's incredibly hypocritical for her to go up there and say, we're going to build all these homes and make them affordable, when the hometown she comes from and the state she comes from is probably has one of the worst housing issues in the country. It just astounds me. And people just nod their heads and say, okay, no, it's not going to be that way. She could say 3 million, could say 30 million. It doesn't matter. It's not going to happen. Why? Because the government she represents has made it impossible. And as far as illegal immigrants and all this other business, I'm going to kind of circle back to a quote here that this is her, one of her quotes from her presidential, one of her speeches she's run for president. As president, I will bring together labor and workers, small business owners and entrepreneurs, and American companies to create jobs, grow our economy, and lower the cost of everyday needs like healthcare, housing, and groceries. We will provide access to capital for small business owners, entrepreneurs, and founders. We will end America's housing shortage and protect Social Security and Medicare. Now, the commentators, Jim Garrity from National View and Washington Post, said, he goes on and makes a comment about that. His quote is, even a candidate as erratic as Donald Trump can recognize the counterpunch. You're the current vice president. Where have you been? Why haven't you done any of that for the past 4 years? Why can't you do that right now? She's still vice president. And supposedly Joe Biden's still president, even though he's been in the witness protection program. These are such great ideas. What's stopping you from putting them out now? And don't tell me it's Republican opposition. That's rubbish. So, maybe they will oppose it. So what? It didn't keep you from proposing it if it's such a great idea. What is it you want to do that Joe Biden won't let you do? He goes on to say, Harris promised, quote, as commander-in-chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world, unquote. I guess the vice president was a casual internal dissenter to the defense cuts that the Biden administration kept proposing. All right? And so she acts like she's running from the outside lane, that she's an outsider trying to change things. She's part of the administration. She's been part of the national federal government since 2016 as a senator. All these things, the Democrats have held the Senate now for 4 years of the Biden administration and 2 years, the first 2 years of his administration. All these things could have been done. Why weren't they done? And so all these things that they're talking about she wants to do, she could have already done, or at least been on the record supporting and proposing these things. And like I read earlier in this podcast, she's been AOL on the whole time. AOL. How about AWOL? That's better. Okay. Anyway, the point is that just kind of sum up this section of it, if you will. Kamala Harris is an unserious candidate. Donald Trump is an unserious candidate. And we're in really bad shape. Okay? I had some people say, are you going to talk about Trump as well? Yeah, I'll talk about Trump. I hate his tariff plan. He wants to impose a 10% across-the-board tariff. That's just the same thing as putting a corporate income tax. All right? It's a tariff across all sorts of goods is just as bad an idea as Kamala Harris's corporate tax. Why is tariff so bad? You say, don't we want to protect from foreign competition? You know what happens when, let's say, we put a 10% tariff on shoes made in Ecuador. I'm just throwing that out there. What happens to the domestic cost of shoes? American-made shoes go up too. They'll raise it up to a level not quite the same as the tariff level, but pretty close. Anytime the government gives you money, like in these subsidies, you're basically going to be causing increased demand and higher prices. And when you have a protective tariff, the only people that profit from that are the domestic companies. And so, so the idea that Trump has about raising tariffs is no different than Kamala Harris's corporate tax. One thing also, he was in Nevada about 3 weeks ago, and he says, I'm not going to tax your tips to all the service workers out there, which, of course, that's a huge voting bloc in Nevada with all the gaming industries out there. 10 days later, Kamala goes out there and says, me too. We're not going to tax tips. Bad idea. Basically, when it comes to income tax, if you start differentiating how it's earned, you're going to have a real problem. That's not fair taxation. So somebody who makes $20 an hour is going to pay higher taxes than somebody that makes like $5 an hour plus tips. And that's not right. It's not fair. If they want to talk about tax fairness, get rid of this idea about not taxing tips. I know it sounds great. When I go to our place or Gina's or wherever I go, I like to tip decently because I know, a lot of these people are either working a second job or they have a family or they're students or whatever else. But I don't think that's really the answer, is not taxing those tips that people leave behind. Those are both endorse a very bad idea. And I guess another thing that's really bothering me about Trump, if you want to get to it, is that the only time he ever seems animated in a speech is when he's talking about himself. I'm watching that clip before, and he's criticizing Harris about her communist plans. It's like he almost resents being forced to talk about policy. He wants to talk about how he was hosed over in 2020. He'd rather talk about how the state of New York is trying to put him in jail. He doesn't talk about us nearly enough. He talks about wanting to restore the greatness of this country and all this other stuff, but he can't stay on the subject very long. He had a great opportunity at the Republican convention to give a shorter speech and make it about us, and it was over 90 minutes long, and it was just a rambling riff. And so that if he had an ounce of discipline on the stand, on the campaign trail, I think it'd be much more competitive. But he just can't seem to get off himself. And as far as, another criticism I have of Trump, I've already alluded to it, the same criticism I have for Harris, is that the deficits are going to get worse under both presidents. I could promise you that. These taxes she's talking about, one of them in particular, I think is horrific, even though she says it's only going to apply to people of a certain income level, is taxing unrealized capital gains. Now, would it affect me or you? No. At the level that we're talking about, some of the very wealthy. It basically says that they will assess a tax based on the wealth, not the income of a lot of people. And they're targeting Elon Musk type people. It's a terrible idea because, for one thing, when a capital asset is sold, it was bought for a certain price, it was sold for a certain price, and you can assess the taxes. How are you going to assess the tax of wealth that has not been realized yet? Who's going to do that? The IRS? The government bureaucracy? So my point is that the wealth tax that's been tried in European countries has failed. France used to do it, and they quit doing it about 10 years ago because it failed. They couldn't assess the value of wealth. Now, it impacted people much lower on the tax-paying spectrum than what they were talking about here. So I'm not saying, as currently proposed, it's going to affect you and I very much, unless, Elon, you're listening to me now, which you should. But that unrealized capital gains is just terrible. And also, they're talking about transition of assets, another tax on that. And so, for example, let's say I had some land that I bought, and it's now appreciated in value. If I predecease my wife, there's no transition tax. But the moment it leaves either my hands or her hands and goes to my children, it's not going to be taxed. If it's sold, it's going to be taxed without having to sell it. All right, it'd be unrealized capital gains. And so let's say I leave it with my son and daughter. 5 years from after we both are gone, they sell it. It's not going to be taxed from the 5 years of growth that they owned it. It'll be since I bought it back in 1970 or whatever it is. And so so basically it's going to, all that accumulated tax from when I first bought it to when it leaves my family's hands is going to be applied at once. And it's crazy. It's going to make it very difficult for people to transition some of their wealth to their kids. And so that's a real big problem, is the unrealized capital gains tax. Now, will these pass Congress? I don't think so, to tell you the truth, because Congress could have done it 3 years ago and they didn't. But they almost did. They almost did. If Joe Manchin hadn't basically said no, then we'd have had the tax rates would be a lot different. Now, here's a kicker in all this conversation. In 2025, the tax cuts that Donald Trump signed in 2017 will expire. And what that means is if they're allowed to expire, then yes, you and me and Josh over there will be paying higher taxes. The tax cuts of 2017 got criticized quite a bit from the left for being a gift to the wealthy and all this other stuff. But it did lower taxes across the board for a lot of people. And I'm telling you that if that expires, then yeah, you'll see higher taxes, every one of you, me too. When Trump signed that law in 2017, yeah, I saw a little bit of change, lower taxes, a little bit for me. I knew that the wealthy were getting a bigger piece of the action. Welcome to America. Welcome to American politics, regardless of party. That seems to happen. But if that is allowed to expire, then everybody's taxes are going to go up. Will it be allowed to expire? I don't know, because Harris is also, like Biden said, I will not raise taxes on people making less than $400,000. But if it expires, that's been proven false. And there's a couple other details I didn't even get to about that really kind of drives me nuts. This idea of giving every new home buyer $25,000 tax credit to buy a new home, all that's going to do is make starter homes and lower priced homes $25,000 more expensive. When part of the bill that the egregiously named the Inflation Reduction Act gave subsidies for people for the first time buying electric cars, like $7,500. What happened? Ford, GM, the rest of the crowd raised their electric car prices. So they got the bulk of the subsidies. All right, that's going to happen here. If I have a house for sale and I know that person buying it has $25,000 already in pocket, the value of my house just went up. That's not going to solve the problem. Okay, and she also talks about increasing the child tax credit. Well, as you saw, she wants to do it $6,000. J.D. Vance proposed $5,000. Vance really is the only one out there talking policy. Neither Harris nor Trump nor Waltz are talking policy. They're talking vibes and memes and joy and, I was robbed and the usual stuff. But Vance is out there talking policy. I think Vance, I think he's getting kind of abused unfairly a little bit, because he's the only one that's actually putting his name to something about what he would want to do if he was in that position. Okay, that being said, I'm not gonna make a suggestion on how to vote. Certainly, that's whatever you base your vote on. That's your prerogative. That's your right. All I'm saying is, do so carefully. Either way, if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, you're going to vote for Harris, you're going to vote for Trump, consider what you're doing and make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, and whatever those reasons are. Okay, again, I'm not telling you how to vote. I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to vote, because that's really immaterial. I'm just saying that the proposals Ms. Harris has put out there and now tries to run from are terrible ideas. I'm also saying about Mr. Trump, if you don't quit focusing on yourself and start talking about us, you're going to lose this election, and you're going to deserve to lose it. We know what you feel about 2020, and a lot of people agree with you. Time to move on. We don't want to hear any more about it. We want to hear if you're reelected, what you're going to do. And if you're going to run your administration a little bit more efficiently than you did before. And as far as Harris, like I said, we don't have really any real idea what she's going to do or say. And her own party's okay with that, and the media's okay with that. There's the governor of Colorado here, one of my readings says, we'll find out after the election about policy. It's just important right now to beat Trump. And that's it. Well, I hope that you were able to check this out. I didn't do the sharing like I normally do, but I'll do it here now because. I hope you can pass this along. These are just my views on it. It isn't the end all and be all, but there it is. Next Monday is Labor Day, so I'll be taking that day off along with Taylor. But we're also Tuesday. I'm going to have Melissa Miller here with the Chamber of Commerce. They got big stuff going on in September. That Power of Heels business. Also, they're going to have they have a big to-do going on in a business luncheon in October. Also, next Thursday, a week from Thursday, I'm going to have Erica Vyers on with Reach Across Johnson County. They have a mental health seminar also in September at Pathway, and we're going to talk about some of these things that are so important about mental health. You know, I'm glad that the idea of treating your issues, so to speak, your mental health issues, are not seen as something to be swept under the rug. It's a good thing, to say the least. So anyway, thank you, Josh. You know, I know you had all these little, I guess you'd call them little glitches, right? You know, what was going on? What was going on? Just couldn't get it to work right away or what?
Stuff wasn't turning on right. We got it to work, though. That's what's important.
It's the important thing is right. Okay. I'll see y'all. I'm sorry. Got to get myself together here. I'll see y'all next Tuesday. All right. I got just somebody texted me right as I was talking, and it distracts me. I'm like a squirrel. There you go. Anyway, I'll see you next Tuesday with Melissa Miller, and y'all have a good week.